She inherited a crumbling Hobbit house buried in the Appalachian Mountains from a great-aunt she never knew existed. And when she finally pried open the root cellar beneath its moss-covered floors, what she found wasn't just forgotten treasure, but $267 million in bonds, rare coins, and stolen art that powerful people had spent 40 years searching for and killing to protect. Before we explore this story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Diner buzzed overhead like dying wasps as Maya Chen wiped down the same sticky booth for the third time that shift. Her fingers were raw from bleach water, her feet screaming in shoes held together with duct tape and prayer. 24 years old, and this was her life. Double shifts, leftover pie for dinner, and an efficiency apartment where the heat only worked on Thursdays. She caught her reflection in the packing Tance's chrome napkin dispenser and barely recognized herself anymore. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back, in a ponytail that hadn't seen a proper cut in 8 months, the kind of exhaustion that settled into your bones and made a home there. She looked older than 24. She felt ancient. "Maya, table 7 needs a refill," barked Gerald, the night manager who smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. He'd been riding her hard all week, threatening to cut her hours because she'd been 2 minutes late on Monday. 2 minutes. The bus had broken down, but that didn't matter to Gerald. "On it," she called back, grabbing the coffee pot with hands that never stopped shaking anymore. Nerves, exhaustion, hunger. Pick one. Table 7 was a trucker who barely looked up from his phone as she poured. No tip last time. Probably no tip this time either. She smiled anyway, because that's what you did when you were invisible. When you'd spent your whole life in the foster care system, bouncing from house to house, family to family, never quite belonging anywhere. You learned to smile through everything. Maya had aged out of foster care at 18, with $300, a garbage bag full of donated clothes, and absolutely no safety net. No family to call when things got hard. No childhood home to return to during the holidays. Just her, the world, and a deep understanding that nobody was coming to save her. She'd tried college for exactly 1 semester before the money ran out. Tried sharing an apartment with roommates before they kicked her out for being too quiet, too sad, too there. Now she had her efficiency, her diner shifts, and on good days, enough tip money to buy something other than ramen. The dinner rush finally died down around 9. Maya's feet felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. She collapsed into the back booth with a cup of coffee she couldn't afford to pay for and pulled out her phone. 3% battery. Of course, she'd forgotten to charge it again. "You got mail," said Denise, the other night waitress, a woman in her 50s who'd been working at Riverside since Maya was in diapers. She tossed a wrinkled envelope onto the table. Postman dropped it off earlier. Said it looked important. Maya frowned. Nobody sent her mail. Bills came to her apartment, and she didn't have anyone who'd write her letters. She picked up the envelope, heavy cream-colored paper, expensive looking. The return address read, Whitmore and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Asheville, North Carolina. Her stomach dropped. Lawyers meant trouble. Lawyers meant debt collectors, or eviction notices, or some new way the universe had found to kick her while she was down. She almost threw it away. Almost. But something made her tear it open. Maybe just curiosity. Maybe just the desperate hope that for once, just once, something good might happen. Inside was a single typed letter on thick letterhead. Dear Miss Maya Chen, I am writing to inform you of a matter concerning your late great-aunt, Eloise Harrington. Miss Harrington passed away 6 months ago at the age of 93. As the sole surviving heir named in her last will and testament, you are entitled to inherit her estate in full. Maya's hands started shaking so hard the letter rattled. Great-aunt? She didn't have any family. She'd been told that her whole life. Her mother had died when Maya was 2, overdose, and there was no father listed on the birth certificate. No grandparents, no aunts or uncles, no cousins. She was alone. That's what every social worker had told her. The estate consists of a property located at 473 Hollowbrook Lane, Willow Creek, North Carolina, and all contents therein. Due to the remote location and unique nature of the property, I strongly encourage you to visit at your earliest convenience, to review the inheritance and sign the necessary transfer documents. Please contact my office to arrange a meeting. This matter requires your immediate attention. Sincerely, Thomas Whitmore, Esquire. Maya read it 3 times, then 4. Then she pulled out her phone, ignored the 2% battery warning, and Googled Whitmore and Associates. It was real, a real law firm. She Googled Eloise Harrington next. Nothing came up except an old newspaper obituary from a tiny mountain town she'd never heard of. Eloise Harrington, 93, of Willow Creek, passed peacefully in her home, a lifelong resident and respected member of the community. Miss Harrington was known for her extensive knowledge of local history and her private nature. She is survived by her great niece. Private services were held. That was it. No details about her life, her work, nothing. Just a handful of words acknowledging she'd existed, and then stopped. Maya's hands were still shaking. She had a great-aunt. Had. Past tense. And that great-aunt had left her something. Property. An inheritance. People like Maya didn't get inheritances. People like Maya got forgotten. You okay, honey? Denise asked, sliding into the booth across from her. You look like you've seen a ghost. I think I just inherited a house, Maya whispered. Denise's eyebrows shot up. No shit? Where? North Carolina. Some place called Willow Creek. She showed Denise the letter. The older woman read it carefully, then handed it back. Well, I'll be damned. You gonna go see it? I don't know. I can't afford to miss work. I barely have enough for next month's rent. Maya, baby, listen to me. Denise leaned forward, her expression serious. I've been serving coffee to sad people for 30 years. You're one of the saddest. If someone just handed you a house, you get your ass on a bus and you go see what you got. Because opportunities like this don't come twice. Maya wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the reasons this was probably a mistake or a scam or some cruel joke the universe was playing. But deep in her chest, something flickered. Something small and fragile and dangerous. Hope. 3 days later, Maya was on a Greyhound bus heading south with everything she owned, stuffed into a backpack. She'd called the law office, spoken to a secretary who confirmed the letter was legitimate, and been given directions to Willow Creek. She'd quit her job at the diner. Gerald had called her an idiot. Maybe she was. The bus wound through mountains that seemed to rise straight out of the earth, like ancient gods. Trees so thick they blocked out the sun. Towns so small they didn't have stoplights. Maya pressed her face to the window and watched America roll past, beautiful and lonely and vast. She'd never been anywhere, never had the money or the reason. Now here she was, traveling to a place she'd never heard of, to claim a house from a relative she'd never met. It felt like a fairy tale. And Maya had learned a long time ago that fairy tales were lies people told children to make the darkness less scary. The bus dropped her in Asheville, around 3 in the afternoon. From there, she had to take a local shuttle that ran once a day out to the smaller mountain communities. Willow Creek was the last stop. By the time Maya stepped off the shuttle onto a gravel road surrounded by trees that seemed to whisper secrets, the sun was already sinking toward the ridgeline. The air smelled different here, clean, sharp, like pine and rain and earth that hadn't been paved over. There was no town center, no gas station, just a handful of houses scattered along winding roads and a general store with a faded Coca-Cola sign. Maya stood there with her backpack, completely lost. When a car pulled up, a sleek black sedan that looked wildly out of place against the rural backdrop. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a man in his 50s with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the nervous energy of someone who'd drunk too much coffee. "Miss Chen?" he called out. "That's me," Maya said cautiously. "Thomas Whitmore. We spoke on the phone." He got out of the car, extending his hand. His palm was sweaty. "I'm glad you made it. The property is about 4 miles up the mountain. The road's not great, so I figured I'd drive you." Maya shook his hand and climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled like leather and air freshener. Classical music played softly from the speakers. Whitmore pulled back onto the road and started climbing. "I have to admit," he said, his voice tight, "I was surprised when Miss Harrington named you in her will. She never mentioned having any family." "I never knew she existed," Maya replied. "Can you tell me about her?" Whitmore was quiet for a long moment, navigating a particularly sharp curve. "Eloise Harrington was a very private woman. Brilliant, from what I understand. She lived alone on that property for over 60 years, rarely came into town, paid her bills on time, never caused trouble. When she hired me to handle her estate 10 years ago, she was very specific about her wishes, which were that, if anything happened to her, everything would go to you. She had your name, your birth date, your last known foster placement. She'd been keeping track of you your whole life." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What?" "I know this must be shocking, but she was adamant. She said when the time was right, you'd inherit everything. She wouldn't explain why she never contacted you directly. Just said it wasn't safe." "Not safe? What does that mean?" Whitmore's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I honestly don't know. Miss Harrington was paranoid in her final years. Talked about people watching the house, people asking questions. I thought it was just old age, but—" He trailed off. "But what?" He pulled the car onto an even narrower road, barely more than 2 tire tracks cutting through the forest. "But after she died, I started getting calls. People asking about the property, about what was in the house, offering to buy it, sight unseen for ridiculous amounts of money. I told them it wasn't for sale, that there was an heir, and they got aggressive." Maya's stomach twisted. "Aggressive how?" "Threatening. Said I should convince you not to accept the inheritance. Said the property was dangerous." He glanced at her, his expression genuinely worried. "I almost didn't tell you about it. Almost just let the state take it. But legally, it's yours. And maybe Miss Harrington had good reasons for leaving it to you." The trees opened up suddenly, revealing a clearing carved into the mountainside. And there, nestled against the rock face like it had grown there naturally, was the strangest house Maya had ever seen. It wasn't quite a cabin, wasn't quite a cottage. The structure was built directly into the hillside, with a rounded door painted deep green and windows that seemed to peer out from beneath a roof, covered in living moss and wildflowers. Stone walls curved organically, following the contours of the earth. A chimney rose from the center, made of river rock, stacked with such precision it looked like ancient masonry. It looked like something out of a storybook. A Hobbit house, Maya thought, like from those movies she'd watched in one foster home, curled up on a couch that wasn't hers, pretending for a few hours that magic was real. "This is it," Whitmore said, parking the car. "The deed lists it as 473 Hollowbrook Lane, but everyone local just called it the Harrington Place." Maya stepped out of the car slowly, her eyes wide. The property was overgrown with wildflowers, ferns, and vines that seemed to embrace the house rather than choke it. A stone path led from where they'd parked to the round door. Everything was silent except for birds and the distant sound of running water. "The property is 12 acres, Whitmore continued, pulling papers from his briefcase. "All of it yours. The house is fully paid off. Taxes are current. There's a well for water and a septic system that was updated 15 years ago. No electricity, but there's a generator and solar panels Miss Harrington installed in the 90s. "No electricity?" Maya breathed. She preferred it that way. Said she liked the quiet. He handed her a thick envelope. These are the keys, the deed, and some personal papers she left for you. There's also a bank account in her name, with about $35,000. Enough to maintain the property, or sell it, if you choose. $35,000. Maya had never had more than $300 at once in her entire life. I need you to sign here, Whitmore said, producing more papers, acknowledging receipt of the inheritance and assuming ownership. Maya's hand trembled as she signed. Her signature looked small and uncertain on the official documents. When she finished, Whitmore handed her the keys and took a step back. Miss Chen, I have to ask, are you planning to stay here? Maya looked at the house, at the wild garden, at the mountains rising around her like protective walls. I don't know. I don't have anywhere else to go. Whitmore nodded slowly. If you need anything at all, please call my office. And Miss Chen? Be careful. I don't know what Miss Harrington was hiding, but she was hiding something. Of that, I'm certain. He got back in his car and drove away, leaving Maya alone on a mountain with a house that belonged to her, and secrets she didn't understand. The sun was setting now, painting everything gold and purple. Maya walked slowly up the stone path toward the round green door. The key felt heavy in her hand. She slid it into the lock and turned. The door opened with a creak that sounded like a sigh. Inside, the house was dim and smelled like herbs, old books, and time. Maya fumbled for a light switch before remembering there wasn't any electricity. She pulled out her phone and used the flashlight function, sweeping it across the interior. The main room was circular, with curved walls made of smooth river stone. A fireplace dominated one side. Its mantel, covered in dried flowers and strange carved symbols, Maya didn't recognize. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with volumes that looked ancient. A small kitchen occupied one corner, with a wood-burning stove and a hand pump for the well water. Furniture was sparse but well-made. A rocking chair, a small table, a chest that looked hand-carved. Everything was clean, dust-free, like someone had been caring for it. Maya stood in the center of the room and slowly turned in a circle. This was hers. This strange, beautiful, impossible house was hers. For the first time in her 24 years, she had a place that belonged to her. Not a foster home where she was temporary. Not a rented room where the landlord could kick her out. This was legally, officially, permanently hers. The weight of it hit her all at once, and she sank into the rocking chair, her backpack sliding off her shoulders. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd learned not to cry. Years ago, crying changed nothing. But sitting here, in the growing darkness, in a house her great-aunt had left her, Maya felt something crack open inside her chest. Something that had been frozen for so long she'd forgotten it was there. She let herself cry, just for a minute, just enough to acknowledge that, maybe, possibly, her life might be different now. When she finally wiped her eyes and stood up, Maya noticed details she'd missed before. The rocking chair had a cushion embroidered with wildflowers. The books on the shelves were organized by subject: herbs, history, folklore, astronomy. On the mantel, beside the dried flowers, was a photograph in a simple wooden frame. Maya picked it up and held it close to her phone's light. The photo was old, the colors faded, but it showed a young woman, maybe in her 30s, standing in front of this same house. She had dark hair pulled back in a braid, strong features, and eyes that looked directly at the camera with an intensity that made Maya's breath catch. On the back of the frame, written in careful script, Eloise, 1978. This was her great-aunt, the woman who'd watched over her from a distance, the woman who'd never made contact but had left her everything. Maya studied the face, searching for some resemblance, some connection. She saw it in the shape of the eyes, the set of the jaw. They shared blood. They shared something. Why didn't you find me? Maya whispered to the photograph. "Why did you wait until you were gone?" The house offered no answer, just the settling creaks of old wood and stone. Maya set the photo back on the mantel and continued exploring. She found oil lamps and lit several, their warm glow pushing back the darkness and making the space feel less haunted, more lived in. The kitchen had jars of dried beans, flour, salt, honey in glass containers that sealed tight. Everything preserved, as if Eloise had known someone would come eventually. In a drawer beside the hand pump, Maya found a leather journal. Her heart quickened as she opened it. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, recipes for herbal remedies, notes about the garden, weather observations. But tucked inside, the front cover was a folded piece of paper with Maya's name on it. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. "My dear Maya, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've come home. I know you have questions. I know you must be confused and perhaps angry that I never reached out while I was alive. There are reasons, complicated and dangerous reasons, that I couldn't bring you here while certain people were still searching. But I've watched over you your whole life. I've known where you were, made sure you were as safe as I could keep you from a distance. It was never enough. I'm sorry for that. The house is yours now. Everything in it and beneath it is yours. Be careful who you trust. There are people who've been looking for what I've protected for over 40 years. They're patient, but they're not kind. When you find what's below, and you will find it because you're curious like I was, please understand that I kept it hidden not for myself, but for you, for your future, for the life you deserve. You are my blood. You are my legacy. You are stronger than you know. With love, Eloise. Maya read the letter twice, her throat tight. Your whole life. Eloise had known about her whole life. While Maya was bouncing from foster home to foster home, thinking she was completely alone, someone had been watching. Someone had cared. And something was beneath the house. Something dangerous enough that Eloise had spent 40 years protecting it. Maya moved deeper into the house, her footsteps echoing softly. There was a sleeping loft accessible by a ladder, with a bed covered in quilts and more books stacked beside it. She found candles and oil lamps throughout, along with matches in waterproof containers. But it was the markings that caught her attention. Symbols carved into the ground, wooden beams overhead, patterns painted on the walls in faded colors. They weren't random. They meant something. Protection symbols, maybe, or directions. Maya pulled out her phone and took pictures of the symbols, thinking she could research them later. Her battery was down to 15% now. She'd need to figure out how to charge it with the generator tomorrow. She found a hallway leading deeper into the hillside. The house extended back farther than she'd expected. Rooms carved directly into the mountain itself. One room was filled with jars of preserved food, vegetables she couldn't name, herbs hanging from the ceiling. Another seemed to be a workshop, with tools and partially completed projects scattered about. A half-finished carved wooden box, a loom with thread still on it. Projects Eloise had started and never finished. At the very back, she found a heavy wooden door, unlike the others. It had 3 separate locks, and the same strange symbols carved deep into its surface. The symbols almost seemed to glow in her phone's light, though that had to be a trick of her exhausted mind. Maya tried the keys Whitmore had given her. The first lock opened with a heavy click. Then the second. The third stuck, and she had to jiggle it for several minutes before it finally gave way, with a sound that echoed through the silent house. The door swung inward, revealing stairs leading down into darkness. Cold air rushed up from below, carrying that strange scent of metal and paper. A root cellar, Maya thought. Old houses like this always had them. Places to store food before refrigeration. Nothing unusual, except the air that drifted up wasn't musty or stale. It was cool, dry, and carried the faint scent of metal and paper. And Maya's great-aunt had locked it with 3 separate locks and warned her in a letter to be careful. Maya stood at the top of the stairs, her phone's flashlight beam swallowed by the darkness below. Every instinct screamed at her to close the door, lock it back up, pretend she'd never opened it. Tomorrow. She could explore tomorrow in the daylight. She was exhausted, overwhelmed. Her phone was dying, and Whitmore's warnings about dangerous people echoed in her head. But that small, dangerous spark of hope flickered again in her chest. The same hope that had made her quit her job and get on a bus to nowhere. The same stubborn curiosity that had kept her alive through years of foster care, when it would have been easier to give up. Maybe Whitmore was wrong. Maybe there was nothing down there but potatoes and dust. Or maybe her great-aunt, a woman who'd watched over her from a distance for 24 years, but never made contact, had hidden something down there. Something worth protecting. Something worth 3 locks and 40 years of secrecy. Something worth leaving to the great niece she'd never met. Maya checked her phone battery. 12%. Enough. She took a deep breath and descended into the dark, each wooden step creaking under her weight. The stairs went down farther than seemed possible. 20 steps, 30, the air growing colder with each one. The walls on either side were rough stone, ancient and solid. At the bottom, her flashlight beam revealed a space much larger than she'd expected. Not a simple root cellar at all, but a proper underground room carved from the mountain itself. The ceiling was high enough to stand in comfortably, the floor smooth and level, and everywhere, covering every surface, were boxes, trunks, and crates. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she moved the flashlight slowly across the space. Wooden crates stacked against the walls, leather trunks with brass fittings, metal filing cabinets that looked military-grade, everything organized, labeled, preserved. She approached the nearest trunk and knelt beside it. No lock this time. She lifted the lid, and the hinges moved smoothly, recently oiled. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were stacks of paper. She pulled one out, carefully, and held it up to her phone's light. It was a bond, a bearer bond, issued in 1979, worth $10,000. And beneath it were dozens more, maybe hundreds, all carefully preserved in waterproof wrapping. Maya's hands started to shake. She moved to the next trunk. This one held coins in protective cases, gold coins that gleamed even in the dim light. The cases had labels: Double Eagle, 1927, St. Gordon's, 1907, words that meant nothing to her but looked impossibly official. The third trunk held paintings, small ones, wrapped in acid-free paper. Maya carefully unwrapped the corner of one and saw colors so vivid they seemed to leap off the canvas. She didn't know art, but she knew quality when she saw it. Her phone battery hit 5%, the warning flashing red. Maya stood up slowly, her mind reeling. This wasn't a root cellar. This was a vault, a treasure room, and her great-aunt had filled it with enough wealth to buy a small town. She needed light, real light. She needed to see everything. Maya turned and ran back up the stairs, her heart pounding. In the main room, she grabbed one of the oil lamps and a box of matches. Her hands were shaking so hard it took 3 tries to light it. Then she grabbed a second lamp, lit it too, and carried both carefully back down the stairs. The underground room blazed into life, under the warm glow of the oil lamps. Maya set them on top of 2 sturdy crates and slowly turned in a circle, seeing everything properly for the first time. The space was perhaps 30 feet across, and just as deep. Every inch was packed with containers of various sizes. Some were labeled in Eloise's neat handwriting. Others had official-looking seals and stamps. Along one wall, Maya saw what looked like file cabinets, the kind lawyers or accountants might use. She moved methodically now, opening containers, one by one. Bonds. So many bonds. From different years, different countries, different banks. Coins, sorted by type and date, some in tubes, others in individual cases. Jewelry in small velvet boxes, pieces that looked antique and valuable. More paintings, all small enough to transport, all wrapped with obsessive care. And papers, filing cabinets, full of documents, certificates, receipts, letters, newspaper clippings. Maya pulled open one drawer and saw it was organized by year. Starting in 1973. She pulled out a folder at random. Inside were newspaper clippings about an art heist in New York in 1976. Millions in paintings stolen from a private collection. Never recovered. The photos showed the same paintings Maya had just unwrapped upstairs. Her stomach dropped. She grabbed another folder. This one detailed a bank robbery in Boston in 1979. Bearer bonds stolen, never traced. She looked at the bonds she'd found. The dates matched. Maya sank down onto one of the crates, her legs suddenly weak. Her great-aunt hadn't just collected valuable things. She'd hidden stolen things. Things people had been searching for. Things worth killing for. And now, they belonged to Maya. Her phone, forgotten on top of a trunk, finally died with a sad little beep. But the oil lamps burned steady, casting dancing shadows across a fortune that shouldn't exist. Maya sat in the underground room surrounded by 40 years of secrets and realized her life had just become infinitely more complicated. Maya didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. She sat in the underground vault until the oil lamps burned low, then climbed back upstairs and lit more. She made tea on the wood-burning stove, using water from the hand pump, her movements automatic while her mind raced. Stolen bonds, stolen art, stolen coins. Her great-aunt had been a thief, or had protected a thief, or had hidden things for someone else. Maya didn't know which, and Eloise's letter hadn't explained. She sat at the small wooden table as dawn light began, filtering through the rounded windows, and she started making a list on the back of an envelope. Everything she'd seen, everything she could remember. The bonds alone had to be worth millions. The coins, maybe millions more. And the art, she had no idea. But if those paintings were from the heist she'd read about, they were priceless. Her hands were still shaking. She'd gone from having $300 to her name to sitting on a fortune she couldn't begin to calculate. Except she couldn't touch any of it. Everything in that cellar was stolen. If she tried to sell even one coin, she'd end up in prison. Unless there was more to the story. Unless Eloise had some reason, some explanation, that made this make sense. Maya went back downstairs as the sun rose higher, flooding the underground room with light from the stairwell. She needed to understand. She needed to know who her great-aunt really was. The filing cabinets held the answers. Maya started with the earliest folder, dated 1973. Inside was a stack of letters, all addressed to Eloise Harrington at this same address. The first one was typed on official-looking letterhead. Dear Miss Harrington, thank you for agreeing to assist with this matter. As discussed, the items in question must be kept secure and hidden until such time as they can be safely returned to their rightful owners. Your discretion and expertise are invaluable. Payment will be transferred as agreed. The letter was signed with initials Maya couldn't make out, but clipped to it was a newspaper article about an art theft in Philadelphia. Private collection, owner murdered, during the robbery, paintings never recovered. Maya's stomach turned. She grabbed the next folder. More letters, more newspaper clippings. A pattern emerged slowly. Eloise hadn't been stealing these things. She'd been hiding them, storing them. But from whom? And why? She found the answer 3 folders deep. A letter dated 1975, handwritten. This time, Eloise. They're getting closer. The family knows I took the bonds to keep them from laundering more blood money. If anything happens to me, everything I've sent you is evidence. Guard it with your life. Don't trust the police. Half of them are bought. Don't trust the feds. They're compromised. Just keep it hidden. Someday, someone will need it to bring them down. Your sister, Margaret. Maya's breath caught. Margaret. Her grandmother's name had been Margaret. She'd found it on her own birth certificate years ago, when she'd aged out of foster care. Margaret Chen, deceased. She kept reading, pulling out folder after folder, and slowly, the story came together like pieces of a shattered mirror. Margaret Chen had worked for a wealthy family in New York in the early 1970s. The Cordovas. Old money. Respected. Powerful. But Margaret had discovered they were running illegal operations. Money laundering. Art theft. Worse. She'd started collecting evidence. Stealing it. Back. Piece by piece. And she'd been sending it to her sister Eloise, in the mountains, where no one would think to look. Then, in 1976, Margaret disappeared. The newspaper clipping was small, barely 2 inches. Woman found dead in East River. Suspected overdose. No suspicious circumstances. Except Margaret had never touched drugs in her life. Maya's mother would have been just a baby then. The timeline made sense now. Margaret died. Her daughter ended up in foster care. And Eloise, terrified and alone, had buried the evidence Margaret died collecting, and never told anyone. Had spent 40 years guarding secrets that could destroy one of the most powerful families in New York. And now those secrets belonged to Maya. She sat on the floor of the vault, surrounded by her grandmother's legacy of stolen justice, and felt the weight of it crushing her chest. This wasn't treasure. This was a burden. A dangerous, deadly burden that had already cost her grandmother her life. But it was also proof. Proof that the Cordovas were criminals. Proof that could finally bring them to justice. If Maya was brave enough to use it. The morning turned to afternoon. Maya climbed out of the vault and forced herself to eat something. Crackers from one of the jars Eloise had left. Cheese that was still good in the cold storage. She needed to think, needed to plan. But exhaustion finally won. She climbed up to the sleeping loft and collapsed onto the bed, still fully clothed. The quilts smelled like lavender and something else, something that might have been her great-aunt's perfume. Maya pulled one around herself and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the sound of a car engine. The light slanting through the window told her it was late afternoon. She'd slept for hours. The engine shut off outside, a door slammed, and footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Maya's heart jumped into her throat. She scrambled down the ladder and peered through the front window. A pickup truck was parked beside the house. Newish, expensive-looking. A man stood on the path, staring up at the door. He was maybe 40, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that looked too clean to be work clothes. His hair was dark, shot through with gray, and something about the way he stood, confident, entitled, made Maya's skin crawl. He knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the house. Maya didn't move, didn't breathe. Maybe he'd think no one was home and leave. "Miss Chen?" he called out. His voice was smooth, educated. "I know you're in there. My name is Richard Cordova. I'd like to talk to you about the property you inherited." Cordova. The name from the folders downstairs. The family Margaret had worked for. The family she died exposing. Maya's blood turned to ice. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he continued. "I just want to have a conversation. Door to door, neighbor to neighbor." That was a lie. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles down the mountain. Maya stayed frozen by the window, watching him. Richard tried the door handle. Locked. He stepped back and looked up at the windows, and Maya ducked out of sight. Her phone was still dead upstairs. No way to call for help. The nearest town was 4 miles of winding mountain road. She was completely alone. "Miss Chen, I'm going to be honest with you," Richard called out. "My family has been looking for this property for a very long time. We've tried to buy it from Miss Harrington for years. She refused every offer. But you don't have the same emotional attachment, do you? You never even met her." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice had an edge. "I'm prepared to offer you $5 million for the property and everything on it. Cash. No questions asked. You sign the papers today, and tomorrow you're rich." You can go anywhere, do anything. All you have to do is walk away. $5 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. More money than Maya had dreamed existed. Enough to change her life forever. But if they were offering $5 million, what was really down there was worth 50 or 500. And they didn't want to buy it. They wanted to bury it. I know what's in the cellar, Richard said, and Maya's blood ran cold. I know what your grandmother stole from us. That's my family's property, Miss Chen. It always has been. Eloise Harrington was just the keeper. Now you are. But you don't have to be. Take the money. Take the life. Leave the past buried where it belongs. Maya's mind raced. He knew about the cellar. Knew about Margaret. How long had they been watching this place? How long had they been waiting for Eloise to die? I'm going to leave my card in the mailbox, Richard continued, his voice hardening. You have 48 hours to think about my offer. After that, the terms change. And Miss Chen, accidents happen in these mountains. People disappear. It would be a shame if you got lost on an evening walk, or had trouble with the generator. Carbon monoxide is such a silent killer. The threat was clear as daylight. Take the money, or else. Maya heard his footsteps retreating, the truck door opening and closing. The engine started, and gravel crunched as he drove away. She waited until the sound faded completely before she moved. Her legs were shaking. She sank into the rocking chair and tried to breathe normally. They knew. The Cordovas knew she was here, knew what she'd inherited, and they were willing to kill to get it back. Just like they'd killed Margaret. Just like they'd kept Eloise isolated and terrified for 40 years. And now Maya was next. What happens next will force Maya to choose between running for her life or standing her ground, uncover truths that powerful men have buried for decades, and transform a terrified orphan into the one person who can finally bring justice home. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Maya sat in that rocking chair until her hands stopped shaking and her breathing steadied. Then she did something she hadn't done since she was a kid in foster care, when the older boys tried to steal her few possessions. She got angry. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being pushed around, taking whatever scraps people threw her way. But this house was hers. That cellar was hers. And her grandmother had died collecting that evidence because she believed it mattered. Maya wasn't running. Not this time. She went back down to the vault with fresh oil lamps and started cataloging everything properly. If the Cordovas wanted a fight, she'd give them one. But first she needed to understand exactly what weapons she had. She found a blank ledger in one of Eloise's desk drawers and started making lists. Every bond, every coin, every painting, the dates they were stolen, the news articles about each theft. She worked methodically, carefully, the way she'd learned to work on engines, one piece at a time until the whole machine made sense. The bonds alone totaled $63 million at face value, probably worth more now with interest. The coins, she couldn't even calculate. Some were so rare she found articles calling them priceless. The paintings numbered 12, all from high-profile thefts between 1973 and 1981. Conservative estimates in the news articles put their combined value at over $100 million. But it was the documents that were the real treasure. Margaret had been meticulous. Every item came with paperwork proving where it came from, how the Cordovas had stolen it, who they'd killed to get it, shell companies, forged insurance claims, murdered witnesses, 40 years of crimes documented in careful detail. This wasn't just evidence. This was a roadmap to destroying one of New York's most powerful families. Maya found photographs too, tucked into one of the filing cabinets. Pictures of Margaret, young and beautiful, holding a baby, Maya's mother. Pictures of Eloise, younger than in the photo upstairs, standing with Margaret, both of them laughing. Sisters who looked nothing alike. Margaret, with her delicate features and bright smile. Eloise, with her strong jaw and serious eyes. There was a letter too, the last one Margaret had sent. It was dated 3 days before she died. Eloise, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. I'm so sorry. I thought I could get enough evidence to bring them down safely, but they found out. Antonio Cordova himself came to the house yesterday. He knows I took things. He said if I gave them back, he'd let me disappear with Rachel. He lied. I saw it in his eyes. We're both dead. Please, please protect my baby. Don't let them find her. Hide her somewhere they'll never look. Change her name if you have to. Just keep her safe. And when she's old enough, when the time is right, give her the truth. Tell her I loved her more than anything. Tell her I died trying to make the world safer for her. All my love. Maggie Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her grandmother had died trying to protect her, and Eloise had spent her whole life honoring that wish, keeping Maya hidden, keeping the evidence safe, waiting for the day when it would finally matter. That day was now. Maya wiped her eyes and kept working. She found more boxes. These ones she'd missed in her first survey. One contained jewelry, hundreds of pieces, all expensive, all stolen. Another held bearer bonds from European banks, worth millions more. A third was full of photographs, surveillance shots of the Cordova family, taken over decades. Eloise had kept watching them, documenting their movements, making sure they didn't find Maya. At the very back of the vault, behind the filing cabinets, Maya found something else. A small leather satchel, sealed with wax. She broke the seal carefully and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was a letter in Eloise's handwriting, dated just 2 months ago. Maya, if you're reading this, then you've found everything and you're probably terrified. I'm sorry. I wish I could have explained while I was alive, but I couldn't risk them intercepting a letter or tapping a phone line. They have resources I couldn't fight. Your grandmother was the bravest person I ever knew. She saw evil and refused to look away. The Cordovas had her killed for it. They would have killed you too if they'd known you existed. So, I hid you. I moved you through the foster system every time they got close. I paid social workers to lose your files. I made you invisible. It wasn't enough. I should have brought you here, raised you myself. But I was afraid. Afraid they'd find you if you were with me. Afraid I couldn't protect you. So I watched from a distance, and I waited. The evidence in this cellar is enough to destroy them. I've been gathering more for years, adding to what Margaret started. Financial records, witness statements, everything. But I'm old. Now. And I'm dying. The cancer is too far gone to treat. So it falls to you. You can take Richard's money if he offers it. He will, I'm certain. 5 million, maybe 10. You can walk away and live comfortably. No one would blame you. Or you can fight. You can take everything Margaret and I collected, and you can burn their empire to the ground. It won't be easy. They have lawyers, politicians, judges in their pocket. They'll threaten you. They'll try to discredit you. They might try to kill you. But you're stronger than you know. You survived 24 years alone. You survived without family, without help, without anyone telling you you mattered. You survived because you're a fighter. Now it's time to fight for something bigger than survival. Whatever you choose, know that I loved you. Know that I'm proud of you. Know that your grandmother would be too. The safety deposit box key is taped to the bottom of this envelope. Box 317 at Asheville First National. Inside are more documents, backups of everything, and a flash drive with video evidence I recorded over the years. If anything happens to you, if they come after you, the bank has instructions to send everything to the FBI and every major newspaper in the country. You're not alone, Maya. Not anymore. With all my love. Eloise Maya's hands were shaking again, but this time from something other than fear. She felt the envelope and found the key exactly where Eloise said it would be. a small brass key on a chain. She sat in the vault, surrounded by 40 years of secrets, and realized she'd been wrong earlier. This wasn't just a burden. This was a gift. A chance to finish what her grandmother started. A chance to matter. Maya climbed back upstairs as the sun set behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. She stood on the stone path outside the round door and looked out over the valley below. Somewhere down there, Richard Cordova was waiting for her answer. Somewhere, beyond these mountains, his family was living in luxury, built on blood and stolen wealth. They thought she'd run, thought she'd take the money and disappear like she'd been disappearing her whole life. They were wrong. Maya went back inside and found Eloise's old rotary phone, one of the few modern conveniences in the house. It still had a dial tone. She pulled out the card Whitmore had given her and called his office. His secretary said he'd already gone home, but Maya insisted it was an emergency. 5 minutes later, Whitmore called back. "Miss Chen, are you all right? I need you to come back," Maya said. Her voice was steady, stronger than she'd ever heard it. "First thing tomorrow morning. And I need you to bring someone from the FBI. Someone you trust. Someone who can't be bought." There was a long silence. "What's happened?" "I found what my great-aunt was protecting. And it's bigger than either of us imagined." Another pause. "Are you in danger?" "Probably. But I'm not. Running." She took a deep breath. "My grandmother died, collecting evidence against the Cordova family. Eloise spent 40 years protecting it. Now it's my turn to make sure it counts for something. The Cordovas." Whitmore's voice went tight. "Maya, those people are dangerous. If they know you have something on them, they do know. Richard Cordova was here today. He offered me $5 million to walk away. Jesus Christ." She heard him moving, papers rustling. Okay. Listen to me. Lock every door. Don't let anyone in. I'm calling a friend at the bureau right now. Someone I went to law school with. We'll be there first thing tomorrow. Can you stay safe until then?" Maya looked around the house. At the symbols carved into the beams. At the photograph of Eloise on the mantel. At the round door that had welcomed her home. "I'll be fine," she said. "This house has protected secrets for 40 years. It can protect me for one night." After she hung up, Maya did exactly what Whitmore said. She locked the doors, checked every window, brought up water and food from the storage room. She moved the rocking chair in front of the main door and sat there with a fire poker across her lap and oil lamps burning bright. If Richard Cordova came back tonight, she'd be ready. But the night stayed quiet. Just wind in the trees, owls hunting, the creek burbling in the distance. Maya sat there until exhaustion dragged at her eyelids, and then she climbed to the sleeping loft with the fire poker still in her hand. She dreamed of her grandmother, Margaret, young and fierce, standing in a mansion full of stolen treasures, stuffing bonds into her bag while guards shouted in the distance. She dreamed of Eloise, old and tired, standing guard over a cellar full of secrets, refusing offers, enduring threats, waiting for the great niece she'd never meet. She dreamed of herself, 24 years old and invisible, finally stepping into the light. When dawn broke over mountains, Maya was already awake. She made tea, ate breakfast, and went back down to the vault. She needed to be ready when Whitmore arrived. Ready to explain everything, prove everything, hand over the evidence that would finally bring the Cordovas down. She was organizing the documents into folders when she heard it. A car engine. Then another. Then a third. Way too early for Whitmore. Maya's blood ran cold. She ran to the window and looked out. 3 black SUVs were parking in front of the house. Men in suits were getting out, 6 of them, moving with the coordinated efficiency of professionals. Richard Cordova stepped out of the first vehicle, and this time he wasn't smiling. Maya's 48 hours weren't up, but apparently they weren't willing to wait. She backed away from the window, her mind racing. The vault. She needed to hide the evidence. hide herself. She turned toward the hallway, leading to the back of the house, just as something crashed against the front door. They weren't asking permission this time. They were coming in. Maya ran. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the house as the front door gave way. She sprinted down the hallway toward the vault, her feet barely touching the floor. Behind her, she heard boots on stone, multiple sets, moving fast. "Find her," Richard's voice commanded, "and find everything she took from the cellar." Maya reached the vault door and slammed it shut behind her, throwing all 3 locks. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the keys. The door was solid wood, thick as a tree trunk, but she didn't know how long it would hold. She looked around desperately. The vault had no other exit. She was trapped. Unless her eyes landed on the back wall. The one she'd noticed yesterday seemed oddly shallow compared to the others. She ran to it and pressed her hands against the stone, feeling along the edges. There had to be something. Eloise wouldn't have built a vault with only one way out. Behind her, something heavy slammed against the door. Once, twice. The locks groaned but held. Maya's fingers found it. A seam in the stone, almost invisible. She pressed hard, and a section of wall clicked inward, revealing a narrow passage carved through the mountain. A escape tunnel. She grabbed the leather satchel with Eloise's final letter and the safety deposit key, stuffed it in her jacket, and squeezed into the passage. Behind her, the vault door splintered. She heard Richard cursing, men shouting. The passage was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Complete darkness. She used her hands to guide herself, moving as fast as she dared. The stone was cold and damp under her fingers. She had no idea where it led, just followed it blindly, putting distance between herself and the men who wanted her dead. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she saw light ahead. The passage opened into a cave mouth, hidden by vines and overhanging rock. Maya pushed through and found herself halfway down the mountain, surrounded by dense forest. Behind her, the house was invisible beyond the trees and stone. She didn't stop. She ran downhill, branches whipping her face, her lungs burning. She needed to get to town, to people, to somewhere. The Cordovas couldn't just make her disappear. The general store appeared through the trees like a miracle. Maya burst through the door, gasping, covered in dirt and scratches. The old man behind the counter looked up from his newspaper, eyes widening. "Help," Maya managed. "Please. Men broke into my house, the Harrington place." "I need easy, the old man said, coming around the counter. "You're Eloise's niece, aren't you? Saw you drive through with Tom Whitmore yesterday." Maya nodded, still trying to catch her breath. "Name's Cyrus Boone. I've run this store for 43 years. He guided her to a chair. "Sit. I'll call the sheriff." "No," Maya said quickly. "Not the sheriff. They might be paid off." "Can you call Thomas Whitmore? The lawyer?" Cyrus studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Whitmore's a good man. I'll call him." He went to the old rotary phone behind the counter and dialed. While he talked in low tones, Maya's mind raced. The Cordovas had the house now. They had the vault. They had everything. Except they didn't. The safety deposit box, Eloise's backup. The evidence was still safe, and Maya had the key. Cyrus hung up. "He's on his way. Said to keep you here and safe. Now, you want to tell me what's really going on." Before Maya could answer, the door chimed, and a woman walked in. She was maybe 70, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and eyes sharp as broken glass. She stopped when she saw Maya. "You're her," the woman said. "Eloise's great niece." "I'm Maya." The woman's expression softened. "I'm Ruth Calloway. I was your great-aunt's closest friend. Perhaps her only friend." She looked at Cyrus. "Put the closed sign up. We need to talk." Cyrus didn't argue. He flipped the sign, locked the door, and pulled the curtains. Ruth sat down across from Maya and folded her hands on the table. I knew this day would come, Ruth said quietly. The day someone finally went after what Eloise was protecting. Tell me what happened. Maya told her everything. The inheritance, the vault, Richard Cordova's threats, the men breaking down the door. Ruth listened, without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each word. When Maya finished, Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I need to tell you about your great-aunt. The real story. The one she never told anyone but me. Ruth stood and poured herself coffee from Cyrus's pot, offering some to Maya, who shook her head. The old woman settled back into her chair and began. Eloise came to Willow Creek in 1973. She was 38 years old, running from a life in New York that had gone wrong in ways most people couldn't imagine. She bought that land and built that house, with her own 2 hands, stone by stone. Said she wanted to disappear into the mountain and never be found. Because of what Margaret sent her, Maya said. Ruth nodded. Your grandmother was desperate. She'd stolen evidence from one of the most dangerous families in New York, and they killed her for it. But before she died, she sent it all to Eloise. Bonds, art, documents, everything that could destroy the Cordovas. Why didn't Eloise go to the police? She tried. In 1976, right after Margaret died, Eloise went to the FBI in Asheville, told them everything. Know what happened? 3 days later, 2 agents showed up at her house. Except they weren't there to help. They were there to take the evidence and make her disappear. The Cordovas had people in the bureau, in the police, everywhere. Maya's stomach turned. How did she survive? She fought. Eloise was stronger than she looked. One agent ended up with a broken arm. The other got a concussion from her cast iron skillet. She drove them off her property and never called the law again. After that, she just hid everything and waited. Waited for what? Ruth smiled sadly. For you. She always said one day Margaret's daughter would have a daughter, and that girl would be the one to finish it. She tracked you. Your whole life. Maya. Every foster home. Every school. Every move. She made sure the Cordovas never found you. She could have just brought me here, Maya whispered. I wouldn't have been alone. She wanted to. God. She wanted to so badly, it broke her heart. But she was terrified they'd follow you to her, and then you'd both be dead. So she loved you from a distance, and prayed you'd be strong enough when the time came. Maya wiped her eyes. Tell me about the treasure. All of it. I need to understand what I'm protecting. Ruth pulled out a key and unlocked a drawer behind Cyrus's counter. She removed a thick leather journal and placed it on the table. This is Eloise's historical record. She kept meticulous notes on everything in that vault. I helped her research some of it over the years. Maya opened the journal. The pages were filled with Eloise's neat handwriting, dates, descriptions, estimated values. She turned to the first entry, January 15, 1973. Received package from Margaret. 20 bearer bonds issued by Chase Manhattan, 1968. Total face value, $200,000. Stolen from Cordova, estate safe. Margaret's note says, Antonio Cordova used these bonds to pay for contract killings. Names attached. Vincent Torres, Michael Romano, Sandra Hayes. All 3 murdered between 1967 and 1972. Maya felt sick. Every item in that vault was soaked in blood. She kept reading. The entries went on for pages. Paintings stolen from museums and private collections, then reported to insurance companies for fraudulent claims. Coins taken from estates the Cordovas bought, then sold the properties for profit while hiding the real treasures. Jewelry from women who refused Antonio Cordova's advances, women who later disappeared. It's not just stolen wealth, Maya breathed. It's evidence of murder. 43 murders over 30 years, Ruth said. That we know of. Probably more. Your grandmother spent 2 years documenting everything before they caught her. And Eloise spent 40 years adding to it, gathering more evidence. building an airtight case. Maya turned to an entry dated 1978. This one was different. The handwriting was shakier, more emotional. March 23, 1978. Today, I met someone who makes me believe in second chances. His name is James Whitmore. He's a young lawyer who moved to Asheville to escape the corruption of big city law. We met at the library where I was researching property law. He doesn't know about the vault. He can't know. But for the first time since Margaret died, I don't feel completely alone. James Whitmore, Maya said. Thomas Whitmore's father? Ruth nodded. Eloise fell in love. Hard. James was everything good in the world. Honest, kind, brilliant. They met every week at the library, then at diners. Then he started driving up the mountain to visit her. For 2 years, she was happy. What happened? Ruth's expression turned pained. Antonio Cordova happened. In 1980, he found out Eloise was seeing someone. He sent his men to Asheville. They beat James within an inch of his life, put him in the hospital for 6 weeks. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, permanent damage to his left leg. Maya's hands were shaking again. Did James know why? No. Eloise told him it was a random mugging. She broke up with him the day he got out of the hospital. Told him she didn't love him. Told him to leave her alone. It destroyed them both. But she knew if she stayed with him, the Cordovas would kill him next time. That's horrible. James never stopped loving her. He got married a few years later, had Thomas, tried to move on. But according to his son, he never spoke about Eloise without his eyes getting sad. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Thomas said his last words were her name. Maya closed the journal, her throat tight. Her great-aunt had sacrificed everything. Love, happiness, a normal life. All to protect evidence that could destroy the people who'd murdered her sister. There's more, Ruth said quietly. The art in that vault isn't just valuable. 3 of those paintings were stolen from Holocaust survivors in 1974. The Cordovas bought them from a black market dealer who'd taken them from families trying to immigrate. Those paintings are blood-soaked twice over. How much is everything worth? Maya asked. Really? Ruth pulled out another piece of paper. This one covered in calculations. We spent years trying to estimate. The bonds with interest, 87 million. The coins, many of them are unique, 90 million, conservatively. The paintings, at least 120 million at auction, maybe more. The jewelry, 30 million. The documents, if you consider what they could do to the Cordova fortune, maybe another 50 million in settlements and seized assets. She looked up at Maya. Total? Somewhere north of $300 million. But 267 million of that can be directly traced and valued. The rest is speculative. $267 million. The number was so large Maya couldn't process it. The legal situation is complicated, Ruth continued. Some of the items have legitimate claims. The Holocaust paintings have families looking for them. The museum pieces belong to public trusts. The bonds are bearer bonds, meaning whoever holds them legally owns them, but they were stolen. So, that's murky. The Cordova assets, those would be seized by the government if the evidence was made public. So, even if I wanted to keep it, I couldn't. No. But, here's the thing, Maya. If you turn it all over, if you expose everything, there are whistleblower provisions. Rewards. The government pays percentages when you help them seize criminal assets. You could walk away with 10, maybe $20 million legally. Enough to never worry about money again. Maya's head was spinning. What about the Cordovas? If I expose them, they'll come after me. Probably, unless they're in prison. And with this evidence, they would be. All of them. Antonio is 93 now, dying of cancer. But his sons, Richard and Marcus, they're still running operations. The grandchildren are being groomed to take over. You could end an entire dynasty of criminals. The door rattled. Everyone jumped. Cyrus peered through the curtain. It's Whitmore, and he's got company. Ruth unlocked the door. Thomas Whitmore rushed in, followed by a woman in her 40s wearing a FBI jacket. The woman had short, dark hair, serious eyes, and the kind of presence that filled a room. "Maya," Whitmore said, relief flooding his face. "Thank God. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. I got out through a tunnel." The FBI agent stepped forward. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Martinez. Tom called me this morning. He said you have evidence related to the Cordova organization." Maya pulled out the safety deposit key. "I have this. It leads to more evidence than you can imagine. 40 years of crimes documented by my grandmother and great-aunt. Murders, theft, fraud, all of it." Martinez's expression sharpened. "The Cordova case has been open in some form for 30 years. They're careful. We've never been able to make anything stick." "That's because they had people in the bureau," Ruth said. "Probably still do." Martinez didn't deny it. "There have been concerns about compromised agents. That's why Tom called me specifically. I've never worked in the New York office. I have no connections to anyone who might be on the Cordova payroll." She turned to Maya. "If what you're saying is true, if you really have evidence that can bring them down, I need you to trust me. But I understand if you can't. These are powerful, dangerous people." Maya studied the agent's face. She'd spent her whole life learning to read people, figuring out who would hurt her and who might help. Martinez's eyes were steady, honest. She wasn't bought. "My great-aunt left me a safety deposit box at Asheville First National," Maya said. "Box 317. Inside is a flash drive with video evidence and documents backing up everything in the vault. Eloise recorded it all over the years. Names, dates, crimes. Can you access the box?" "I have the key, but I want a deal first." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "What kind of deal?" "Immunity for anything my grandmother or great-aunt did. They stole those items, but they stole them to preserve evidence. I want that acknowledged. And I want whistleblower protection, a percentage of whatever assets you seize." "That's a reasonable request," Martinez said. "I can work with the prosecutors on that." "What else?" "The Holocaust paintings. They go back to the families. No questions, no bureaucracy. Those people have suffered enough." "Agreed." "And the Cordovas. I want every single one of them prosecuted. Antonio, Richard, Marcus, all of them. I want their empire burned to the ground." Martinez smiled grimly. "That's exactly what I want too. Do we have a deal?" Maya looked at Ruth, who nodded encouragingly. She looked at Whitmore, who said, "My father would have wanted this. He would have been proud of you." Maya took a deep breath. "We have a deal. But I need protection. They broke into my house this morning. They know I have the evidence. We'll put you in protective custody immediately," Martinez said, "and we'll get a team to secure your property. If they took anything from the vault, we'll get it back." "Most of it's still there," Maya said. "I barely got out with this key." "Then let's move fast. The bank opens in 2 hours. Tom, can you facilitate the access?" Whitmore nodded. "I'm the estate attorney. I have the paperwork to prove Maya's identity and her right to access Eloise's property." "Good. Ruth, Cyrus, thank you for protecting her. Can you keep this conversation confidential?" "For Eloise," Ruth said simply. "We've kept her secrets for 40 years. We can keep them a little longer." They moved quickly. Martinez made calls, arranging protection, coordinating with agents she trusted. Whitmore prepared documents. Maya sat quietly, processing everything Ruth had told her. Her great-aunt had loved someone, had sacrificed that love to keep him safe, had lived alone in a house built into a mountain, guarding secrets and waiting for a great niece she'd never meet to finally finish what Margaret had started. And now, Maya was that person. The one who would bring justice for her grandmother's murder. The one who would honor Eloise's lonely sacrifice. The one who would finally make the Cordovas pay. Maya, Ruth said softly, sitting beside her. There's one more thing you should know. Eloise left you a video message. She recorded it 2 months before she died, gave it to me for safekeeping. She said to only show it to you after you found everything and decided what to do. She pulled out a small USB drive. There's a computer at the library in town. When this is over, when the Cordovas are arrested and you're safe, watch this. It's her goodbye. Maya took the drive, her hands trembling. Thank you for taking care of her, for being her friend when she couldn't have anyone else. She was easy to love, Ruth said, her eyes wet. Stubborn as hell, paranoid beyond belief, but good, so deeply good, just like her sister, just like you. By 9 in the morning, they were at Asheville First National Bank. Martinez had brought 2 other agents, both women she trusted absolutely. Whitmore presented the paperwork. Maya showed the key and her ID. The bank manager, a nervous man who kept glancing at the FBI agents, led them to the vault. Box 317 was large, one of the biggest the bank had. It took both the manager's key and Maya's to open it. Inside was a fireproof case. Maya lifted it out carefully and set it on the private viewing table. Everyone held their breath as she opened it. Inside was exactly what Eloise had promised. A flash drive in a protective case. Thick folders of documents, organized by date and crime. Photographs, hundreds of them. And a single DVD in a paper sleeve marked, "For the FBI, the truth about the Cordova family." Recorded testimony of Eloise Harrington, May 2024. Martinez picked up the DVD with gloved hands. Do you mind if we watch this? Please, Maya said. They moved to a private room where the bank manager set up a laptop with a DVD drive. Martinez inserted the disc, and after a moment of loading, Eloise's face appeared on screen. She was older than in any photo Maya had seen. Her hair completely white, her face lined with age and pain, but her eyes were still sharp, still fierce. She sat in the main room of the Hobbit house, the fireplace visible behind her. My name is Eloise Margaret Harrington, she began, her voice strong despite her obvious illness. I am 93 years old, and I am dying of pancreatic cancer. This testimony is given freely and truthfully, and I am of sound mind, as verified by Dr. Patricia Yoon of Asheville General Hospital, whose notarization is attached to this recording. For the next hour and 47 minutes, Eloise told everything, every crime, every murder, every piece of evidence, and where it came from. She named names, gave dates, explained the Cordova operation in detail that made Maya's blood run cold. She told how Margaret had discovered the crimes while working as Antonio Cordova's housekeeper, how Margaret had started stealing evidence, piece by piece, and sending it to her sister, how Margaret had been killed when they caught her. She told how she'd tried to go to the police, how she'd nearly been killed herself, how she'd spent 40 years in hiding, gathering more evidence, watching the Cordovas from a distance, documenting everything. And she told about James. Her voice broke when she talked about him, about the love she'd had to sacrifice, about watching him from afar for decades, knowing she could never be with him without putting him in danger. I've lived alone for so long, Eloise said, near the end of the recording, tears streaming down her weathered face. I've had no family, no friends except Ruth, no life beyond these walls. I did it to protect my great niece, Margaret's granddaughter, a girl I've never met, but have loved from the moment I learned she existed. She looked directly into the camera. Maya, if you're watching this, then you found everything. You know the truth. And now, you have a choice. You can walk away, take whatever money they offer you, and live your life. No one would blame you. God knows you deserve peace after everything you've been through. Her expression hardened. Or you can fight. You can take everything I've given you, and you can destroy them. The Cordovas have killed 43 people that we know of. They've stolen hundreds of millions. They've bought judges, politicians, police officers. They've corrupted everything they've touched. But corruption can be burned away. Evil can be destroyed. All it takes is one person brave enough to stand in the light and tell the truth. Eloise leaned forward. I believe you're that person, Maya. I believe you're stronger than you know. You survived 24 years alone. You survived without anyone to catch you when you fell. That kind of strength doesn't come from an easy life. It's forged in fire. So if you're ready, take this evidence and burn their world down. Do it for Margaret. Do it for me. Do it for every person they've hurt. But most of all, do it for yourself. Because you deserve to know that you matter. That your life means something. That you have the power to change the world. She smiled through her tears. I love you, Maya. I've always loved you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person. But I'm proud of you. And wherever Margaret is, she's proud too. Now go make them pay. The recording ended. The room was silent except for quiet crying. Maya wiped her eyes and looked at Agent Martinez. What do you need from me? Martinez's expression was pure steel. Everything. And in return, I'm going to give you justice. For Margaret. For Eloise. For you. She stood up. Let's go arrest some monsters. The raid on the Cordova estate happened 3 days later. Maya wasn't there. Sequestered in a safe house in Raleigh, while Martinez assembled a task force of agents she'd personally vetted. But she watched the news coverage on every channel, unable to look away. 57 FBI agents descended on the Cordova compound in Westchester at dawn. They found Antonio Cordova in his bed, too sick to run. Richard and Marcus tried to flee through a tunnel system beneath the estate, but agents were waiting. By noon, 17 members of the Cordova family and organization were in federal custody. The news anchors called it the biggest organized crime bust in 2 decades. They didn't know the half of it yet. Maya sat in the safe house with Ruth, who'd insisted on staying with her, and watched Richard Cordova's face as federal agents led him out in handcuffs. He looked directly at the camera, and Maya saw murder in his eyes. Even caught, even facing life in prison, he radiated menace. He can't hurt you now, Ruth said quietly. I know, but he would if he could. That's why men like him belong in cages. Over the next 2 weeks, the case exploded. Martinez's team catalogued everything from the vault, matching each item to crimes dating back to the 1960s. The bearer bonds were traced to bank robberies and embezzlement schemes. The coins had been stolen from estates and private collections. The paintings, especially the 3 taken from Holocaust survivors, made international headlines when their histories came to light. The documents were worse. Margaret and Eloise had documented murders, extortion, money laundering, human trafficking, crimes that stretched across 5 decades and touched hundreds of lives. The Cordova Empire had been built on blood and suffering, and now every drop was coming to light. Maya gave her testimony in a federal building in Washington, D.C., with prosecutors who looked at her like she was some kind of miracle. A nobody waitress who'd inherited the evidence to destroy one of America's most powerful crime families. The story was too good not to leak. Within days, every news outlet in the country was running it. Orphan girl brings down crime dynasty. Foster kid inherits fortune and uses it for justice. The woman who destroyed the Cordovas. Maya hated the attention. Camera crews camped outside the safe house until Martinez had her moved. Reporters called her a hero, but she didn't feel like one. She felt like someone who'd simply finished what her grandmother and great-aunt had started. She was just the last link in a chain of brave women who refused to let evil win. The legal proceedings took months. Maya spent most of that time in protective custody, moving from safe house to safe house, always with armed guards, always looking over her shoulder. The Cordovas had allies, people who might want revenge. Martinez took no chances. But slowly, the case came together. Antonio Cordova, died 2 months after his arrest, his body finally giving out. His sons were convicted of racketeering, murder conspiracy, fraud, and a dozen other charges. Life in prison without parole. The grandchildren who'd been running operations got 20 to 30 years each. Associates flipped, providing even more evidence. The entire organization collapsed like a house of cards, and through it all, Maya worked with prosecutors and lawyers to honor her deal. The Holocaust paintings were returned to surviving family members in emotional ceremonies that made Maya cry every time. Museum pieces went back to their rightful institutions. The government seized the Cordova assets, hundreds of millions in property, accounts, and investments. Maya's whistleblower reward was calculated at $18.7 million. The lawyers said it could have been more, but she'd insisted on restitution for victims first. Families who'd lost loved ones to Cordova violence received settlements. People whose property had been stolen got compensation. By the time everyone else was paid, Maya's portion had shrunk considerably. She didn't care. $18.7 million was more than she'd ever dreamed of having. More than enough to change her life forever. The real question was what to do with it. She was sitting in a hotel room in Charlotte, 6 months after the arrests, finally allowed to leave protective custody, when Thomas Whitmore knocked on her door. He'd been her lawyer through everything, refusing payment, saying it was what his father would have wanted. "There's someone who wants to meet you," he said, "if you're up for it." "Who?" "Sarah Levine. Her grandmother was one of the Holocaust survivors whose paintings you returned. She flew in from Tel Aviv this morning." Maya's chest tightened. "Okay. Yes. I'd like to meet her." They met in the hotel lobby. Sarah was maybe 60, with silver-streaked dark hair and her grandmother's eyes in the photograph Maya had seen. When she saw Maya, she didn't say anything at first. She just walked over and pulled her into a hug so tight, Maya could barely breathe. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "Thank you for bringing her home." She pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "The painting you found, it was in my great-grandmother's home in Vienna. It was all she had left of her mother, who died in the camps. When it was stolen, it broke something in her. She died thinking it was lost forever." Sarah pulled out a photograph. It showed an elderly woman standing in a gallery, staring at a painting of a garden in spring, the same painting that had been hidden in Eloise's vault for 43 years. "We hung it in the museum in Jerusalem," Sarah continued, "in her honor. Because of you, hundreds of people will see it every day and remember her story. You gave my family something we thought was impossible. You gave us back a piece of our history." Maya couldn't speak. She just held Sarah's hands and cried. That night, alone in her hotel room, Maya made her decision. She called Whitmore and told him what she wanted to do with the money. All of it. 2 weeks later, she was back in Willow Creek. The Hobbit house stood exactly as she'd left it, though FBI agents had spent weeks cataloging the vault and removing evidence for trials. Now it was empty except for Eloise's belongings, her books, her furniture, her life. Maya stood in the main room and felt something settle in her chest. This was home, not because of the money or the land or the strange beauty of it, but because Eloise had built it with love, because Margaret's courage lived in its walls, because 3 generations of women who'd refused to give up had led her here. She wasn't selling it. She was staying, but she wasn't staying alone. The first thing Maya did was renovate. She hired local contractors, people from Willow Creek, who'd known Eloise and respected her. They added electricity while keeping the house's character. They expanded carefully, adding guest rooms carved into the mountain itself, built in the same style as the original structure. They turned the vault into a memorial room, walls covered with photographs and documents, telling Margaret and Eloise's story. Then, Maya established the Harrington Foundation for Foster Children. $5 million went into the endowment immediately. The foundation's mission was simple: to ensure no child aged out of foster care alone and unprepared the way Maya had. The foundation provided scholarships, job training, housing assistance, and most importantly, mentorship. Every kid who came through the program was paired with an adult who checked in regularly, who cared, who made sure they knew someone was watching out for them. The Hobbit house became the foundation's heart. Maya converted the expanded space into a retreat center where foster kids could come for weekends or summers. A place to feel safe, to feel seen, to understand they mattered. She hired staff, all people who'd been through the system themselves, people who understood what these kids needed because they'd needed it too. Ruth Calloway became the foundation's director, bringing her wisdom and fierce love to every child who walked through the round green door. The first group of kids arrived on a Saturday in spring, 8 teenagers from across North Carolina, all about to age out with nowhere to go. Maya greeted them on the stone path, her heart hammering. "Welcome home," she said simply. They looked at her suspiciously, the way Maya had once looked at every adult who promised things. But over the weekend, something shifted. They explored the property, hiked the mountain, sat around a bonfire. Maya built in the clearing. They heard Margaret's story, Eloise's story, Maya's story. They learned that broken things could be rebuilt, that being alone didn't mean being unloved, that their lives had value even when the world treated them as disposable. On Sunday night, one girl, 16-year-old Jasmine, with eyes too old for her age, found Maya sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset. "This place is real, isn't it?" Jasmine asked quietly. "You're not going to take it away?" Maya looked at her and saw herself 8 years ago. "It's real, and it's here whenever you need it." "We're here," Jasmine nodded slowly, and for the first time all weekend, she smiled. Over the next year, the foundation grew. More kids came through. Some stayed days, others weeks. They found internships, scholarships, apartment deposits paid, job interviews arranged. More than that, they found community. They found adults who believed in them, and peers who understood. They found hope. Maya ran the foundation from the Hobbit house, but she also went back to doing what she loved. She built a garage on the property, a proper one with lifts and tools and space for projects. She started taking in old cars, broken-down machines other mechanics wouldn't touch, and she rebuilt them with kids from the program, teaching them skills while they worked. There was something healing about taking something rusted and forgotten and making it run again. The kids understood the metaphor without her having to explain it. The media attention eventually faded. Maya gave one interview, to a journalist Martinez trusted, telling the full story of Margaret, Eloise, and the 40-year fight for justice. After that, she refused all other requests. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to live. One afternoon in late autumn, Maya was in the garage, working on a 1987 Chevy with 3 kids, when Ruth came down the path. "Someone's here to see you," Ruth called. "Says it's important." Maya wiped her hands and walked up to the house. A man in his 30s stood on the porch, nervous, holding a folder. He had kind eyes and the uncomfortable posture of someone who didn't want to intrude. "Miss Chen, my name is David Whitmore. I'm Thomas Whitmore's son." Maya blinked. "Is your father okay?" "He's fine, but he asked me to bring you something. My grandfather, James Whitmore, he left letters, dozens of them, written to Eloise over 40 years. He never sent them, just kept writing, telling her about his life, his work, his feelings. My father found them after Grandpa died." David held out the folder. "Dad thought you should have them, so you could know how much Eloise meant to him, how much he never stopped loving her." Maya took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were letters, years and years of them, all addressed to Eloise in James's neat handwriting. She opened one at random, dated 1993. "My dearest Eloise, I saw you at the farmer's market today. You didn't see me. You were buying tomatoes and laughing at something the vendor said. And for a moment, you looked just like the woman I fell in love with 23 years ago. I wanted to walk over, to talk to you, to ask why you left. But I know you had your reasons. You always did everything for a reason. I'm married now, as you probably know. Sarah is a good woman. We have a son, Thomas. He's brilliant, going to be a lawyer like his old man. I love them both dearly. But Eloise, you're still the one I think about when I can't sleep. You're still the one I wonder about. Still the one I hope is happy. I don't know why I write these letters. You'll never read them. But somehow, it helps to pretend I'm talking to you, to tell you about my life like we used to do, sitting in that little diner in Asheville, hours passing like minutes. I hope you're well. I hope you found whatever peace you were looking for. I hope you know I never blamed you for leaving. I hope you know I never stopped loving you. Yours, always, James. Maya read 3 more letters before she had to stop, tears blurring the words. James had loved Eloise until his dying day, and Eloise had loved him back, sacrificing that love to keep him safe. Thank you for bringing these, Maya told David. They mean more than you know. After he left, Maya took the letters to the memorial room in the old vault. She placed them carefully beside Eloise's journal and the photographs of her great aunt. 2 people who'd loved each other but could never be together, separated by violence and fear, and terrible choices made for noble reasons. But they'd both left legacies. James, through his son, who'd helped Maya bring the Cordovas to justice. Eloise, through the house, the foundation, the hope she'd preserved for 40 years. Love didn't always look the way people expected. Sometimes it looked like letting go. Sometimes it looked like protection from a distance. Sometimes it was sacrifice, so complete you gave up everything, even happiness, for someone else's safety. Maya understood that now. Eloise hadn't abandoned her. She'd loved her the only way she could, from the shadows, keeping her safe, waiting for the day Maya would be strong enough to finish the fight. And now Maya was honoring that love the same way, by taking what she'd been given and using it to protect others, by making sure kids like her, kids who felt invisible and worthless, knew they mattered. The Foundation's 2nd annual gala was held in Asheville that winter. Donors, supporters, and graduates of the program gathered to celebrate everything they'd accomplished. 23 kids placed in permanent housing, 41 scholarships awarded, 16 kids in job training programs, dozens more touched by the weekend retreats and mentorship. Maya stood at the podium in a dress Ruth had helped her pick out, looking at the crowd of people who'd believed in the impossible. People who'd understood that broken kids could be saved if someone just cared enough to try. 2 years ago, she began, I was a waitress making minimum wage in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. I had $300, no family, and no reason to believe my life would ever be different. Then, I inherited a house from a woman I'd never met, a great aunt who'd watched over me my entire life, from a distance, who'd protected me in ways I never knew, who'd left me not just property, but purpose. Maya's voice steadied. Eloise Harrington and my grandmother Margaret Chen spent their lives fighting for justice. They sacrificed everything, love, safety, happiness, to protect evidence that would eventually bring down one of America's most dangerous crime families. They died, never knowing if their fight mattered. But it did matter. It mattered so much that 43 murder victims finally got justice. It mattered so much that stolen art went back to families who'd lost everything in the Holocaust. It mattered so much that an entire empire built on blood and corruption was destroyed. She looked out at the kids, sitting in the front row, the ones who'd come through the program, wearing their best clothes and uncertain smiles. And now their fight continues through all of us. Every time we tell a foster kid they matter, we're honoring Margaret's courage. Every time we give someone a safe place to land, We're honoring Eloise's sacrifice. Every time we refuse to let another child disappear into the cracks, we're proving that broken things can be rebuilt. The Hobbit house that Eloise built isn't just a house. It's a promise. A promise that no matter how alone you feel, no matter how invisible the world makes you, there's a place where you belong. There's a family waiting. There's hope. Maya's throat tightened. My grandmother and great-aunt couldn't save themselves. But through me, through this foundation, through every child we help, they're still saving others, still fighting, still refusing to let darkness win. That's their legacy. That's our mission. And as long as I'm alive, as long as this foundation exists, no child will ever have to face the world alone the way I did. The applause was thunderous. Maya stepped away from the podium and was immediately surrounded by kids, donors, staff. But through the crowd, she saw Ruth standing by the wall, tears streaming down her weathered face, giving Maya a thumbs up. Later that night, Maya drove back up the mountain alone. The Hobbit house glowed warm in the darkness, lights in every window, smoke curling from the chimney. She parked and sat for a moment, just looking at it. 2 years ago, this place had been a mystery, a strange inheritance from a stranger. Now it was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. It was where she belonged, where she'd finally found family, even if that family was built rather than born. She walked up the stone path and opened the round green door. Inside, everything was quiet and peaceful. She lit the fireplace, made tea, and climbed to the sleeping loft. On her nightstand was the USB drive Ruth had given her months ago. Eloise's final message, the one meant only for Maya. She'd been too afraid to watch it before, afraid of what it might say, what it might ask of her. But now, with the foundation thriving and the Cordovas destroyed, and her life finally settled, she was ready. Maya plugged the drive into her laptop and pressed play. Eloise appeared on screen, sitting in this same loft, propped up against pillows. She looked so frail, so tired, but her smile was genuine. "Hello, Maya," she said softly. "If you're watching this, then you did it. You found the evidence, you made the choice to fight, and you won. I knew you would. I always knew." She shifted slightly, wincing with pain. "I don't have much time left. The cancer's spreading fast now. But I'm not afraid. I've lived a long life, longer than Margaret got, longer than I probably deserved, and I'm ready to rest. But before I go, I wanted you to know something. All these years, watching you from a distance, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every time you moved to a new foster home, every time you struggled, every time you were alone, I wanted to bring you here, wanted to give you the childhood you deserved." Tears ran down Eloise's face. "But I couldn't risk it. The Cordovas were always watching, always searching. If they'd found you, they would have killed you to get to me. So I loved you from the shadows and prayed you'd survive long enough to inherit this fight. You were so strong, Maya, stronger than you ever knew. You survived things that would have broken most people. You kept going when it would have been easier to give up. That strength, that resilience, that's what made me certain you were the right person to finish this." Eloise leaned closer to the camera. "The house is yours now. The land, the foundation, money, all of it. But more than that, you have a choice. You can use this place however you want. Live here alone, sell it, walk away. It's your life now. But if you're watching this video, I suspect you've already made a different choice. I suspect you've turned this place into something beautiful. Something that helps others the way I wish I could have helped you." She smiled through her tears. "That's what I hoped for. That's what I dreamed of all those lonely years. That this house wouldn't be a tomb for secrets anymore. That it would be a home, a real home, full of laughter and life, and second chances. So, thank you, Maya. Thank you for being brave enough to fight. Thank you for honoring Margaret's sacrifice. Thank you for making this place matter. Eloise's voice dropped to a whisper. I love you. I've loved you since the day I learned you existed. You're my blood, my legacy, my hope, and I'm so very proud of you. Now go live, sweet girl. Live the life Margaret and I never got to have. Be happy. Be free. Be everything we dreamed you could be. Welcome home. The screen went dark. Maya sat in the silence of the loft, tears streaming down her face, and felt something inside her finally heal. That last broken piece of her heart, the piece that had always wondered why she wasn't worth keeping, why nobody had wanted her, why she'd always been alone. She understood now. She hadn't been alone. She'd been protected, loved from a distance by women who'd sacrificed everything to keep her safe, who'd believed in her when she didn't believe in herself, who'd left her a legacy not of money, but of purpose. Maya closed the laptop and looked around the loft, at the quilts Eloise had made, at the books she'd read, at the life she'd lived in isolation so Maya could eventually live in the light. I did it, Maya whispered to the empty room. I made it matter, and I'm going to keep making it matter. For you, for Margaret, for every kid who needs a home. She climbed into bed and pulled the lavender-scented quilts around her. For the first time in her 26 years, Maya Chen fell asleep, feeling completely, utterly safe. The years that followed were the best of Maya's life. The foundation grew, expanding to 3 more states. The Hobbit house became legendary, a place kids talked about in group homes and foster care facilities, with the kind of reverence usually reserved for fairy tales. Maya never married, never had children of her own, but she had dozens of kids who called her family, who came back years after aging out to show her their college degrees, their job offers, their own children, who told her she'd saved their lives just by proving someone cared. She stayed in the mountains, working on cars, running the foundation, hiking the trails Eloise had walked. She kept the memorial room open to visitors, telling Margaret and Eloise's story to anyone who would listen. She made sure their sacrifice was never forgotten. On the 10th anniversary of inheriting the house, Maya stood on the stone path at sunset with Ruth beside her. They'd just finished a ceremony planting a garden in Margaret's memory, flowers and herbs that would bloom every spring. You did good, Ruth said quietly. Better than Eloise ever dreamed. I had help, Maya replied, from 2 women who never gave up, who fought, even when they knew they wouldn't live to see justice. They're proud of you. Wherever they are, they're proud. Maya looked up at the house, at the round door and moss-covered roof and windows glowing warm, at the place that had taken her from invisible to invaluable, from alone to surrounded by family. I used to think broken things stayed broken, she said softly, that once something shattered, it could never be whole again. Ruth squeezed her hand. What changed your mind? Maya smiled. I inherited a crumbling house from a woman I never met, and found out broken things don't stay broken. They transform. They become something new, something stronger. The house was broken. Eloise was broken. Margaret was broken. I was broken. But we're not anymore. We're rebuilt. We're whole. We're home. She turned to Ruth, tears glistening. That's what I want every kid to know. You can be broken and still become beautiful. You can be alone and still find family. You can start with nothing and still change the world. All it takes is one person who refuses to give up. One person who believes you're worth saving. One person who looks at something forgotten and sees possibility. Ruth pulled her into a hug. You're that person now. For hundreds of kids, you're their Eloise. Then, I hope I do it better than she did, Maya said. I hope I do it in person, with hugs and laughter, and the certainty that they're loved, that they matter, that they're home. As darkness fell over the Appalachian Mountains, the Hobbit house blazed with light. Inside, 20 foster kids were having dinner, laughing, planning their futures. Outside, Maya stood on the path her great-aunt had built and felt the weight of 2 generations of courage settling on her shoulders, not as a burden, as wings, because Maya Chen wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't broken beyond repair. She was a warrior, a guardian, a woman who'd taken 40 years of hidden pain and transformed it into hope for thousands. And somewhere beyond the stars, in whatever place brave souls go when they finally rest, Margaret and Eloise were watching, smiling, proud of the girl they'd protected, proud of the woman she'd become. The orphan who'd inherited a Hobbit house and $267 million in secrets had become the woman who rebuilt broken lives with love. Anyone can transform pain into purpose, if they're brave enough to believe broken things still deserve to be saved. As the moon rose over Willow Creek, Maya Chen walked back into her home. Not the one she'd been born into, but the one she'd chosen, the one she'd built, the one that had taught her the most important truth she'd ever learned. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who believes you're worth saving even when you can't see it yourself. The waitress who'd once had nothing had become the woman who gave everything that mattered away. Because the greatest fortune Maya ever inherited wasn't money. It was the courage to love broken things back to life, including herself. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep discovering the extraordinary in the ordinary. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that every person has a purpose. Every story matters. And the most valuable inheritance anyone can leave is the belief that broken things can become beautiful again.